The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Derek Krebs, and today's focus is going to be on the Prospero product that does the reporting and budgeting. I'll begin for the first maybe 3 to 5 minutes with a nice little PowerPoint introduction, but we're going to spend bulk of the time looking at product features and functionalities, so welcome one and all. A couple quick little housekeeping items are everybody's currently on mute. We will be recording this session, so you can maybe view it later or share with your coworkers. And we'll send a nice little follow-up email. Thank you for attending today. And also, I'll be attaching the recording link and secondly, the little PowerPoint deck in case you want to further review it. We have a nice mixed audience today and probably maybe 3 classifications of people on today's phone call. And this is a nice little overview session, hopefully meet the needs of these different audiences. One would be existing Prospero customers that we have. You might be a veteran user. I see maybe some new staff that perhaps are wanting to learn the product. Or a second group of people might be some end users, usually in the finance and accounting area, most of our audience, but sometimes we have IT members that perhaps are using some alternative products or some of the old legacy Microsoft applications. And third and finally, I see several partners that are maybe looking to sell and deploy Prospero. So welcome one and all. As I continue, let me take a moment to introduce myself a little bit further in the MSX group. My name is Derek Krebs. I'm a senior consultant with the MSX group, and it's been a very nice ride here the last 27 plus years I've been doing this. If we turn the clock back all of those years, we started a private company of about 150 employees out of Denver, Colorado by the name of FRX Software, and we had such great reporting and budgeting products that Great Plains bought us, and then secondly, Microsoft did. So we internally worked at Microsoft going on close to about 15 of those years, like 30 I've been affiliated approximately with the product. And then as we got gobbled up, about maybe 12 years ago, we got spun off as, again, a private company. And I'm so glad we did because we now have development back underneath our control, which means really you're getting new features and functionalities much sooner because I see a lot of you using the existing Microsoft FRX or Manager Reporter for the reporting or Microsoft Forecaster for the budgeting. There's really been no new features or service packs in those products upward to 5 and 10 years. So it's good to have some of the market demand and features now inside the tool. And I'll give you a nice little glimpse of several new features that makes your reporting life easy, what I call the bring the easy button to your process. So again, welcome one and all. Do jot down my email on this slide, because if you have any questions, by all means, I'll have you take advantage of the question area within the GoToWebinar. It's that little panel there to your right. If it's blocking your view, that little orange arrow, you can minimize or maximize that window. But I'll usually field some questions about halfway through the session at the tail end, and I'll be monitoring that throughout. So usually I'll try to field some questions more casually and interactively during the call, but everybody is currently on mute. But if you have any follow-up questions after today's session for those that are viewing the recording, by all means, open door, contact me or MSX Group at any time. There's my email or info@msxgroup.com. All right, for several of the maybe new and blue users of the application, I'll just give you a few little minute overview of the Prospero application. It does both the reporting and budgeting side, which historically for the Microsoft people were 2 separate programs and processes. We now seamlessly tie that into one cohesive product and tool. Does the reporting, budgeting / forecasting. We've added great little charts and graphs or little dashboarding you'll see soon within the application. You'll have all the information at your fingertips to be able to analyze data, to be drilling down to the account and transaction level, including maybe vendor or customer information without the need to be a general ledger user. That's all going to be self-contained within the Prospero reports. And some nice differentiators that stands Prospero and MSX Group above the rest. Numerous. I have some slides here later that I'll talk about it, but one of those that I want to emphasize is for those people that are using the Microsoft product. Since we worked all those years internally at Microsoft, we have great little easy migration that takes all of your FRX and Manager Reporter reports and brings them into Prospero, including some of the forecaster budget data and setup. So that allows you to hit the ground running. Otherwise, some of the competing products, you have to spend weeks and months of effort that is very time consuming and costly. All right, last couple little PowerPoint slides, just two key areas that we'll be looking at today. One is going to be on the reporting side. So it could be a very mixed bag of reports, including income statements, balance sheet, statement of cash flows, you name it. Primarily, we're going to be linking to general ledger data. But what's also great is Prospero has its own data warehouse that meets your needs for any non-general ledger data. Maybe 2 or 3 examples I'll later show you today would be perhaps budget data, or secondly, statistics. How about units sold, head count, square feet, some statistic examples, or even recording data, both by actual and budget, to non-general ledger segments. A couple that we'll see will be perhaps maybe want to budget down to the employee level. That is not my general ledger segment. Or additionally, maybe I want a revenue and cost of goods sold side. Maybe I want to further record and budget down to, let's say, the product or item level. That might not be a general ledger segment. We can definitely capture that inside Prospero to meet those needs that oftentimes you're doing manually or offline. What we did is all those years with Microsoft, we took the best things within the applications, we brought them into Prospero, and one of those is the accountant and user-friendly nature to report, where simply we have 3 interchangeable building blocks, like the row that we see there to the left in blue. Second building block of 3 might be our columns, like there in red, of a month and year to date this example is for. And third building block is our reporting tree structure, where it might be multiple company or locations that you could interact with and drill down in some different hierarchy and tree levels. That's a 2-dimensional view in this PowerPoint slide, but we'll definitely see a 3-dimensional view of trees within the application. And I'll show you 2 different trees. One might be on the location or company, and secondly on the account segment, which is going to be very user-friendly to reduce and avoid a lot of maintenance you're manually doing today on your reports or budget templates. Speaking of budget, instead of doing Excel hell, most people are coming from on their budget side, Prospero has great budgeting ability with all the extra bells and whistles that you'll want, like budgeting down to the employee level, maybe products, customer, salesperson level on the revenue and cost of goods sold side, including line item detail, notes, annotations, etc. Some bullet points we'll see that I want to lay out on the table. Now, final PowerPoint slide or 2 that I'll call your attention to. I'll probably just go over this very quickly and loosely, but what we did is we reflected on all the pain points that most of you face in your reporting and budgeting world, and we sort of paraphrase this. We're seeing slide 1 of 2 that we paraphrased the column to the left, your current challenges or issues today, and how we solve those with Prospero. Maybe a couple little highlights, like item number 1, regarding the Microsoft stack that many people I see existing users coming from, has no new features. So you're limping along, but great active development of Prospero, and most new features, I think it was like 20 or 30 plus that we've added in this last year alone, is coming from our customer feedback. So I'll encourage you to take advantage of the little feedback area in the product that, if time permits, I'll show you. Security was very painful. An example in Manager Porter on the Microsoft side, very painful and restrictive, because in Manager Porter you had only 4 rigid roles that you had to work within, but now Prospero gives you infinite flexibility and security. Second example is on Microsoft Forecaster. You might have 5 or 10 different segments in your general ledger, but Microsoft Forecaster only allowed you to secure only 1 segment of your general ledger, like department only or location only, where Prospero now allows you to nimbly secure it multiple levels, like company, department, location, account, numerous different ways. Item number 4, I want to emphasize, being historically 2 separate programs and processes for budgeting reporting, but now 1 cohesive tool. Now, item 5, a keyword I want to call your attention to, is what we call summary accounts and expanding. So an example that's very tedious and painful in your world today is if you add a new revenue or expense, you have to go back to all your different reports and manually add that. Or secondly, maybe your budget tool, have to manually add and link all these files and process together. But with Prospero, we usually avoid any type of maintenance altogether by using summary accounts and expanding, that I'll further take you to. The 6th item, way back when, Microsoft FRX, before later Manager Porter came along, had some nice little output options, but when Microsoft went to Manager Porter, they yanked all these away. You only had 1 output option only going to the electronic viewer. But with Prospero, we brought numerous customer requests back for our output, including the viewer or workspace, we call it, definitely, which I can actively and securely use to drill down to account and transaction level, including charts, graphs, annotations. But what we also did is brought back the requested output to Excel or maybe PDF or to a printer. That way I can efficiently create some report books or board packages, however you want to quote it as. All right, and last PowerPoint slide, sorry to maybe take an extra moment or two, but I'll be done with this on this last slide, is some last little bullet points. Never really was there any ability within the Microsoft stack to do any charting or graphing, but we definitely brought in that into the tool. I had to call a dashboard or KPI analysis. Item number 8, one of my favorite features is I always like analyzing data. I never was fond of processing it when I worked in the accounting world, but we're going to see some very nimble drill down and even drill order I can change nimbly on the fly. An example might be, hey, I want to drill into my multi-company report, but when I drill into, let's say, revenue, I first want to see it by company, or then secondly by location, or I could reverse that hierarchy easily on the fly without having to go to a second or third report. So my fond favorite feature I'll show you of drill down order and changing that. Maybe last little item too, like statistics. That's really just speaking of the data warehouse to use as your leisure for any GL or non-GL data. And maybe lastly, since I'm a very penny pincher in my own household, another differentiator Prospero numerous is our feature-rich power, but also a fraction of the price of our competition. So as little as $49 a month and less than a cup of coffee per day, you can have a base package of the tool. So we have both a subscription model, or you can just buy it outright, being my little couple of remarks. All right, well, thank you. And that's the end of my PowerPoint slides, especially for some of the new users and partners. I wanted to at least meet some of their overview needs on that. Now, without further ado, let's now spend the rest of the time inside the application of the last 45 to 50 minutes here in the session here. And when I do launch Prospero, what we're going to do is we're going to look at 2 different user types. First of all, an end user, and then secondly, as maybe a power user. I'm going to start with an end user's perspective, and whenever we access and deploy Prospero, you have the flexibility of it might be a client product that you have on your computer, or a lot of people are going through some remote desktop or Citrix server that IT easily deploys applications by. Or secondly, I'd say probably our largest customer base this day and age are using a web or cloud version of Prospero, so easy for setup and deployment of that. And as regarding your general ledger, it does not matter where your database resides. Most customers, I'd say, have their general ledger database on-premise. Or secondly, a large audience is now moving to third-party providers or cloud providers for their general ledger, which we can also easily link to any database if it's on your premise or third-party product. So a few little IT notes for the ease of deployment, and even you can change your structure easily. Literally 1 hour or less usually is what we can reconfigure it if you do change your mind, as I see a few people on the phone call that went from maybe an on-premise to a cloud version, just to give some nice little real-world examples on. All right, now as an end user, I'm going to start with, whenever I open up Prospero, I have a nice, easy, quick launch landing page. We want to keep it super simple for your users that most oftentimes are not the financial savvy type of user. So I have really 2 columns here. One called reports and charts, or secondly here to the right, input, meaning it might be that time of year I'm going to be doing my budgeting. And how about every month? How about I might be the CFO? I give my users 2 reports. So this end user has report number 1 here at the top, what I'll call an actual versus budget, or maybe the report number 2 at the bottom, maybe a nice little rolling 12-month trend or this year, last year comparison. I'm going to go ahead and open up this report. And let me just take a moment to further acquaint you with our demonstration company's structure. We have multiple segments in our general ledger. Now, company is not a segment in our general ledger. However, if you're in a multi-company environment, what we easily do is create a virtual segment on company that allows me easy multi-company consolidation. Now, this end user I'm logged into as only has access to one company, what I'll call our United States company. But later, when I log in as our CFO, they'll have multi-company access, including maybe a second or third company I'll later share with you. Now, another segment or dimension in our chart of accounts is location and finally department. And the account, like revenue versus expense or balance sheet, that's usually contained in the line set or row definitions of our reports or budgets. That's why we don't see it in this little selection. Now, let's secondly look at location. And this user, what we call their assignments, is restricted to only see a single location of Denver. But later when we log in as our CFO, along with multi-company, we have about 10 locations that the CFO will have access to, but this user only has access to Denver. And finally, in our demonstration company, we do have department. Now, as I look at this little pick list for department, there's two nimble ways to access any one of these segments. Currently, we're looking at what I call a list of our departments, or here in the lower left, I also can see a nice reporting tree. Now, another differentiator and great automation to your process is this tree called all. It's automatically created and maintained by the system versus in your probably current world today, you're always having to manually create the trees and update them maybe as new departments or accounts get added. This might be one of 2 or 3 examples on trees, this first one being on a department. And now, as my Denver location that I'm in charge of, I want to look at my report usually at the top level. I'm going to look at all departments, and then I can maybe look at individual department A or B secondly. But what I'm going to do is start drilling down and interacting with the report. Now, speaking of interacting, let me bullet point maybe 3 or 4 things I'm going to next lead you into as I'm now role-playing one of my managers' end users reviewing their financial data. One of those being perhaps you've asked me as one of your managers to explain any variances of action versus budget. So those are what we call annotations or notes that are indicated with those little blue dots. Secondly, perhaps I want to graphically review my data, like a picture speaks 1,000 words type of phrase. Third bullet point or interaction of this report, I'll be drilling down to the account and transaction level, including maybe vendor or customer information I'll have at my fingertips. Or maybe fourth and finally, perhaps I want to export this to Excel or PDF to maybe further share or do some ad hoc analysis with that data. Let me start with the first bullet point of 4 I just quoted, where how about these variances? If I hover on top of this little bullet point, I can read that memo or note, or if I put my cursor anywhere on this line, I see over here to the right a nice little annotation history that tells me which user and when added this note. And I'm logged in as a generic user called Manager1, but normally you'd see Bob or Sally on this date and time added this memo or note. And what I could easily do is I can right click on any line of my report, and then you see this choice for annotation. I simply just type in a nice little memo or note, and also we have icon on the toolbar. And this is very Microsoft user friendly. You'll see the navigation that we aimed and strive for. So literally within about 10 or 15 minutes as I coach and train my end users, that's all really we need to do for training a user to open and review the reports and or do budget input. I'll probably save some little keystrokes. I'm not going to type in the memo or note. I'll just highlight that. There's probably plenty I want to share with you today. Now, second little bullet point of 4 is I'm going to come up here and display this report data graphically. We have out of the box maybe about 9 or 10 different chart types, and these are also drill downable. We're currently looking at a pie graph, and I'll show you behind the scenes of how you can easily choose of one of our many graph types. And even I'm going to drill in, how about I'm going to call this my margin analysis, looking at maybe action versus budget. Now, I began opening up the report looking at all departments, but now when I drill in of the graph, here's my next level. We see the legend here to the right. These are my next little departments, or they could be products or locations based on your general ledger structure and segments. Now, when I drilled into that graph, which is super cool, I also can switch back to my original report view. So this icon in the toolbar, I'm currently in the graph, but I'm going to come here to the report data. And what I did was, as the heading implies, I drilled into revenue. We're looking at department A, B, C, and this is a nice tabular view of that same data I just drilled into. And if I wanted to take this out to Excel, as maybe one of my third or fourth bullet points here, I'm going to do so. And this might be maybe one of 2 or 3 examples I'll do of exporting a report. Now, the first example is I'm taking what I drilled into, again, being revenue, where I drilled in, we're seeing it by product or departments, those various lines, and that is only one report and only one sheet. Super cool. I have all my fonts, formatting, colors, etc. contained within that Excel output. Now, second example is one report, but perhaps I want to see this by my different locations. So notice the different sheets here. This is one report and income statement. I might have Miami Department A, Miami Department B, San Francisco, Department A, B, etc. My final Excel example is multiple reports. So how about every single month? My board of directors or banker likes to see 3 reports. So what I can easily do is create and generate what we call a report collection of those multiple reports. So here might be tab or report number 1 for my income statement, or here is report or tab number 2, my balance sheet, or report or tab number 3, what we call the cash flow. And then just a keyword then for some of our existing users, I always do a little coaching and training, that's simply what we call a report collection. This is an Excel flavor to it. I'll show you also a PDF flavor and maybe an electronic flavor of that same report collection. So let me just go briefly to the internet or PDF glimpse of this data. And then here is, let's call this my financial report package. So here might be page number 1. Let's call it our income statement. But in this case, it's income statement looking at all locations. But if I page down, this might be report number 2, my balance sheet or cash flow. Or if I page down, it could be report number 3, 4, 5, etc. So this is a nice little easy report book or collection I'm sending out to a PDF or printer. And then the final example I'll do is I'm going to log in now as my CFO. I call this my little dashboard. So let's say as a CFO, I like to log into Prospero every morning and I like to see maybe 4 items there. This is a report collection. The 2 reports to the left, maybe different income statement or balance sheets and different slices and dices. Like here in the lower left, I'm showing my locations or departments in columns like admin, sales, marketing. Or here's maybe some nice little dashboard of graphs, maybe cash collections or revenue for the quarter, month, or year, etc. So there's some other graphical types that I could further interact with like I briefly did earlier, but there might be my CFO dashboard that they're logging into as. All right, and let me finish up with maybe the 4th little bullet point interaction item. I'm going to go back in as my end user. I was just drilling into a given line item like revenue, looking at graphically or changing it to tabular view, then exporting it. But how about the next thing I'll demonstrate is our nimble drill down and drill order I can change. Let me remind you, this user only saw one company, our United States company, and they only saw one location, our Denver location. We open this up at all departments, but I could come up here looking at sales. I'm going to drill in, and here is my next level down. Based on how you design the report or your chart of account structure, these are the different departments. I'll call this Department A sales or Department B marketing. And then I can further drill into and even see the transaction level. When I do drill into the transaction level, what I'll additionally see are some additional columns here to the right, which we've blanked out for confidentiality reasons, but there might be some vendor or customer information, and these are all the individual transactions of that single revenue item or expense item I just drilled into. So I'll have all of that information as a manager at my fingertips, and I do not need access to the general ledger. I just need access to Prospero. Or alternatively, if you did not want to buy a user license for them, we saw the Excel or PDF outputs as some other avenues you might do as your deployment, as I see some different phased people on this phone call of their implementation, either searching it out or in the beginning, midst of their implementation, or maybe some veteran 5 or 10 year users of Prospero. So, all right, let me close this down. That same drill down, I want to now show you as the eyes of our CFO or a person that has access to multi-company. What I'm going to do is click on this button called Reopen the Report. And I just want to emphasize and maybe share with you maybe a second or third example on trees, because for the company, instead of a single company, this user now is currently seeing all companies. Same story. Here is where we automatically create this tree that does multi-company consolidation. I'm looking at all companies currently. Now, as the CFO, when I'm looking at all companies or all locations, when I drill down, I usually define ahead of time my normal drill order. In this case, my first level is by company. So here is company number 1, US, or company number 2, Europe. Or then when I drill into US, this might be what I call level number 2, looking at the different locations within my United States entity that I just drilled into, and I could maybe go down to the department or account, transaction level. But let me emphasize, we're currently looking at level number 2, our location. Here is a great tab, level number 1 for our company. And what I can easily do is change on the fly. I do not have to go to a second or third or fourth report, which most people in their world today have to. And this button here, what's called change the drill order. Now here's my normal hierarchy I just did, meaning company first, location second. I could have gone down to department, but how about what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag department to the very top. Now when I'm analyzing the sales, I don't have to hunt and peck at maybe 20 or 30 different levels or sheets or tabs of the report. If I wanted to then see this variance, I'm then just going to come up here and drill into my sales like we did before. Instead of company first, location second, department third, I'm immediately analyzing at the department level. So maybe I see my exception or variances. Oh, here is marketing. That is a problem area. And now what I'm going to do, once I easily found that problem area within literally seconds, I'm going to come up and click on this button called Reopen the Report, and I'm going to turn my attention maybe to that department. How about I'll just choose 300 as my maybe a more granular review of the financial data. I always like to add based on the user security or what we call assignments of what they might be limited to, like we saw only US company and location Denver earlier, that user. And now here at the very top, usually we have a nice little heading, but this report does not. It might just say, hey, you're now in Department A marketing or Department B sales. All right, so let me just recap that. One of my favorite features here, changing the drill order. I can easily predefine that or change it on the fly. All right, let me now segue to some other sort of high-level things that, especially for the new users and partners in the tool here, I'm going to take one little step back. I'm logged in as maybe a CFO or power user in the finance and accounting area. And let's look at this button called the catalog view. And now really what I'm doing is I'm just sort of doing a shameless little plug, but really it's more from a consultant's words that I am, not a salesperson, is really the power and ease of this product versus we're not an Excel hell add-on. Now what we're really looking at to this catalog view is I'm looking at all the reports inside the system. I have nice little information here to the right, like who last modified the report, when it was last generated or published, like published meaning available then to my end users. And I can come up here and easily inventory, and even I'm going to sort all my reports by the line or row format being used. So this goes back to the initial little PowerPoint slide where we use the same row, column, or tree that are interchangeable. And that was some of the best things of the Microsoft products that we brought into the report. So here's an example of all these reports all share this one line or row format called my income statement, which means if I wanted to change any structure of that report, I just do so in one spot. I don't have to go to 10 or 12 different reports or Excel files. And then here's just the same visual to that. The luxury of my little job over the last 25 years is I work with several other products that are Excel add-ins. I despise them because they're not user-friendly. Because if it were Excel add-in, which Prospero is not, thankfully, all you would see are Excel files like this. You would have no visibility of who last modified it and when, and you'd have no visibility of maybe what shared line set. An example might be, hey, Excel hell, which we're not. Maybe these 3 reports all share the same line, and usually if I need to change the structure, I usually have to open up all the individual separate reports. Again, thankfully, Prospero is not that for its ease of use and interchangeable row, column, or tree. Now let's take that same thought further, and let me acquaint you with the building blocks a little bit further for what I call sort of the setup and design of both our reports and budget templates here. And let's begin by looking at the line set used for this report. I'm going to close this one individual department I looked at. And then here is where I was looking at all of my companies and all my departments. Now, since I'm a power user, I have access to go edit and view the line or column for the report. The column is very simple and basic, like actual, prior year, and budget. We might even easily convert that from your FRX or Managed Reporter use so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But let me just focus on where we've made your life super easy and avoided and reduced maintenance usually. So here's an example of expenses that I'll focus on. On the toolbar, I'm going to click on this button here called Show Hidden Columns, because maybe one example of multiple is I might want to show the account number at times, but maybe for my banker or board member, they don't. So instead of 2 or 3 different reports, I can just have one. A second example might be these actuals might be a quarter or year to date, and maybe I'm going to show the individual months of that quarter or year by showing the hidden columns, just like I can show hidden lines. So there's multiple ways to have a summary report versus detail and drill down. So there's a couple other new features I want to call your attention to. But let me continue with the expenses and what we call a summary account and expanding upon that to avoid all the pains whenever you add maybe a new general ledger account. Well, expenses, I'm showing above this row all the individual expense accounts. As I look to the line set, since I'm a power user, all we really needed is one line to produce all of those individual lines here. Now let's look at a third example of on our trees. The first was by department. The second was by our company and the ease of consolidation. But now the third example is where you can create nice trees on our account segment. You can have multiple different trees, but usually most companies only need one master tree that does both balance sheet and income statement accounts. So here is our focus of net income. Maybe I further subgroup net income by gross profit, which might be cost of goods sold and revenue. And then maybe I further break down cost of goods sold by maybe labor, material, and overhead. But let's look a little bit further at my expense example, because usually I can efficiently define this tree. In this case, our expenses is this range of accounts. Or in other words, if I add a new account to my general ledger, Prospero is going to automatically link and grab that data. We interface with it over 30 different accounting systems and versions. It's automatically going to bring that account into the system through our automatic integration. Another thing is I do not have to update this tree whenever I'm using ranges or wildcards. And then finally, I do not have to update my line set. That's maybe used both for report and my budget template, which I'll segue to budgeting in just a second. Because here in the background, I'm simply expanding above or below the line. And then here to the right, 0 means show me every individual account. But I could say, hey, show me 1 level down, or maybe 2 levels. An example to that might be on cost of goods sold. If I type the number 1 here, I might show 1 level down, which might be that first subgroup of labor and material and what I call overhead. All right, so that's one of my favorite features here, using summary accounts and expanding. Just recapping a couple of the buzz keywords there to call your attention to. Now, inside this line set and most row definitions, we focus on just the main account like revenue or expense. Well, I could do things the old-fashioned way, like the Microsoft FRX and Managed Reporter. I can show the individual accounts and ranges, but we use more nimbly these summary accounts. Over here to the right, we have also great flexibility of additional segments we can include or not based on the structure of the report. Because here is maybe I want to show or filter also by location, or I also can filter by department, etc. So as I do so, meaning turn on that segment, it just gives me another column or filter if the report is dependent upon it. Now let me show you another example I quoted earlier to that, because maybe in my column, usually we have time, meaning like this year, last year, actual versus budget in our column. But here's an example where these might be companies or locations or departments in the column. So we have that same type of feature in the column definition where I can just turn on and off filters wherever it might be needed. All right, so let me now continue. That was just maybe a highlight of 2 within the line set without getting too long-winded here. Let me close that out, but that's also one of the differentiators and ease of use within the application. Let me now turn my attention briefly to the budget side. This column here to the right, it is automatically read real time from the Prospero budget system, because how about all my users as of last night entered all their budget data? I'm avoiding Excel hell. It's automatically linking and consolidating all that data for both actual and budget. I'm going to take one step back. That is, whenever I logged in as my end user, which I'm going to return to, I began in the quick launch area. I was looking at this actual versus budget report, looking at maybe the last month as the accounting team closed the books. But how about now? It's that time of year or month where they want me to do some budget input or forecasting. So I have a little shortcut here to the right. Same type of security settings. I'm restricted based on the single company like United States, Denver, and I'm going to look at maybe 2 or 3 departments, starting with my administration department. And really cutting to the chase, I'm just going to open up 3 departments. And I just really wanted to share you how, hey, they're using maybe the same line set. If I open up 100 different departments, it's just one line set or row definition. It might be using the same expand feature. So if I add new accounts, I don't have to touch it normally. And then here's what I'll call department number 1. Let me now open up department 2, which is also an expense-only department, using the same row format or definition. And then finally, after these 2 expense-only departments, I'm going to open up a third and a final department that looks a little bit different, meaning they have a different row definition. So here, reopen the report. I'm now going to open up one of my revenue departments that has revenue and cost of goods sold. And an earlier phrase I want to maybe bring back up is when I spoke of the Prospero warehouse being GL and non-GL data. Let me share with you 3 concrete examples to such. Now, first of all, here in yellow, products like 10 motors, 20 compressors, product is not a segment in my general ledger, but I can easily include that inside Prospero to record both actuals and budgets to that. Normally from the GL database we link, but we can also grab different GL databases and import even from Excel file as need be. Second example of 3 of non-GL data are some statistics like units sold, sales price or cost per unit. Not my general ledger, but definitely I can record actuals and budgets to it. Now, third and finally, non-GL data example is I'm returning back to my first expense-only department. Now, notice some of the color coding, like gray shade. That simply is my preferred color, indicating items you do not enter budget data directly to. So here are some of our salaries, statistics for headcount, hours, full-time equivalency, etc. And then here, when I come up to the HR tab, because here's my salaries, etc., I then can see who works in this department. You have flexibility to budget by the person's name, like Bob or Sally, or secondly by position, because maybe I'm a manufacturing company or I'm in healthcare, where maybe I want to do it more by position, like I need this many nurses, I need this many technicians, this many level 1 engineers, etc. Now, as I really go to the left to the right, just at a high level, you can get as simple as you want in your budgeting, but you can get as granular as you need be. So here's some examples that maybe I have seasonality and employees that are both hourly and hourly. So here are some buttons. I'm showing people mixed because these are either the full-time equivalency or the higher number is hours worked per month. But if I wanted to show everybody hourly based, I simply have a little toggle switch here. If I wanted to see everybody, maybe in my viewpoint, it's more hours I might determine the data by, or full-time equivalency. And as I take one step back, I'm looking at the granular detail by individual or position, but then here is all that data maybe rolled up that I can analyze by this department, or I could go to the report, see it even rolled up by the different hierarchies or location departments. All right, and then the last few little fields here, I can further get granular regarding pay raises. So here's an example where this person starts making $25,000, but how about I'm going to give them a 3% raise, or excuse me, 10% raise in period 3, as I misquoted there. And even I can do a second or third pay raisability. I just simply would add or show some additional columns that me, the power user, can easily do. And I have some little toggle switches here at the very top if I want to see more fields or less. And then maybe some last little key things, because obviously Staffing and payroll is one of the largest cost organizations. I'll spend an extra moment or two quoting some other granular things. Might be commissions. Maybe it might be some sales people that I want to budget, maybe their revenue or commission rates or benefits. I'll even use MSX Group as an example. We have employees in about 10 different states. I live out here in California. So whenever I import all my staff, it does not matter what payroll system you're using, does not. I simply would import that in. I'll just have a column for their name, what location, department, how much they make. But then also I might have a column saying, right, Derek is a California employee or New York, and we have one simple table where you define what these rates and limits are. Second or third example is health insurance. It could be one simple flat rate for everybody. We'll call it $500 per month. But nope, maybe I want to budget down to those that might be single, family, or high deductible, low deductible. And you define what these column names are, and you define what these column choices are. And usually I just show you one last table. This is my end user perspective. Usually they might not even see this detail because I might be a role or group that has visibility to HR, or maybe not at all. If I didn't, this tab would not even be seen or available. Or if I did have access or belong to a role or group that had HR, it might be read only. And you easily control what those security permissions are. And if time permits, I'll show you just a couple of things related to that. But as promised, instead of now my end user perspective, let me just show you related to HR, one screen behind the scenes as a power user where I define my human resources assumptions. And now what I'm doing is actually I'm having bad flashbacks of competing products I still use to this day where it's so painful, and usually they will not show you what we transparently will do of what it takes to set up some of your human resources assumptions. Now let me just take literally 1 or 2 minutes here, because me, the CFO and accountant, I'm the only person that has visibility or access to the screen I'm sharing with you. And really on my human resources assumptions, like I might also have some capital assumptions, etc., I have a top half of my screen and a bottom half. Now this top half of the screen really tells the system what general ledger account you budget for salaries. And most Prospero customers really only have one salary account, and they only have one line here. But our demonstration purposes, if you want to get a little bit more granularly, a couple of things might be, hey, it might be more than one salary account that you might budget to based on the position. Or secondly, it might be hourly or salary, and it might be some other granularity like, hey, is this person bonus eligible, commission-based position, yay or nay? And I'll probably reserve some of that extra granularity, but the top half is simply telling the system what expense account, and I can zoom into my general ledger from here. So there is expense account 6010 for this position, or if I scroll up, so this is again a live real-time link to my general ledger accounts. And then finally, I'll wrap up here. I'm the CFO, and some of my budget assumptions could either be a percent of salary driven, or secondly, a fixed dollar. Now, the first example of two is percent of salary, either with a limit like FICA or without a limit like Medicare, the second line. And what the system's going to do is all the complex calculations, I shouldn't even say calculations because it's only one simple table. It does that all the way down to the department and individual automatically for me. So this one simple table, that's all you have to set up and maintain, and literally I can do so in seconds. Now, these are percent of salary based with or without a limit, but alternatively, they might be a fixed dollar per month. And then here might be choice A, B, or C I might have for health, like single or family. I could come over here to the right. I might have an insert maybe a high deductible or low deductible plan, and maybe some different dollar values associated with that. So in literally seconds, I added maybe a second or third choice, like, how about I'm going to also add a new column here to the right. You see maybe a fourth field here, a fifth field, but I'm going to come up here and click on this little up arrow, and maybe I'm going to add a sixth field because maybe I want to budget by 401k. I'll call it pension or 401k. And then I might have maybe 2 or 3 choices, what I'll call choice A or B. Maybe it might be a 1% contributor or 2% contributor, et cetera, et cetera. So there is how I can add additional benefit fields using this little up arrow, name it whatever I want, and easily define the choices and either percent or fixed amount per. So this one simple table gives you control and visibility as a central finance power user to your human resources assumptions. All right, good. Just wanted to be transparent and show you a little bit of the setup behind the scenes of that human resources modeling. And just to recap, and also as I'm thinking back maybe 20 years and hundreds of people I've helped with on their budgeting, 3 ways I commonly see for budgeting staff: by name or position. And finally, I also could do it statistically based, because maybe based on my revenue level projections, I need X number of hours or full-time equivalent based on my revenue level. And I call that statistically, like we briefly saw this one screen I'll go back to. These are just statistics like unit sold price, but I could also model any account, income statement, or balance sheet statistically, meaning driver-based using statistics and formulas. All right, so let me now get back. Some other last little bells and whistles inside my budget screen are memos or notes. My earlier memo or note was historically looking at last month's actual versus budget report, but how about now on the budget side? I'm going to turn on this little button here called Show the Annotations column, because now as either a budget inputter or maybe a manager, a budget reviewer, I can easily see who added the note when, like Bob or Sally, and this time date stamp, and maybe here's their rationale or notes for why they're budgeting these amounts. This might be one tool or technique I might have for that, adding notes to it. Now a second capability, and let's use this account 7350. Let's say I'm in marketing and Derek just budgeted $200,000 for marketing, but why the heck did he do so? And what I can easily do through a right click, I can right click to do or insert line items. Just like in the toolbar, I'll use the same button here. I'm going to collapse all the line items or expand. So here is maybe one example, account 7350, my advertising expense account, or here might be tuition or travel that I can, on the fly, provide additional details for that budget. So I'm then given more answers instead of questions in my process. So giving you, again, control and visibility to that data in numerous different ways. All right, last little bullet point or two is down here at the very bottom. Let's role play. I'm in the IT area, or maybe I'm a manufacturer. I need some new automobiles or equipment. This is what I call my new capital additions that I'm budgeting for. On this capital tab, I can come up here and click on the insert button. And then how about what we love for maybe those new prospective partners or customers here? How about Prospero? I want to maybe budget this 140 or 50 bucks per month on this item here. And then me as the finance and accounting user, sort of like my HR setup I briefly showed you, you control what this pick list is. So here in the background, if you budget balance sheet and cash flow, which I'd say a lot more companies are doing so this day and age, which Prospero allows us to do so, I simply would define a pick list that says, hey, here's maybe my balance sheet account. As we see this column here in the background, that's the different capital types that you define. Also the depreciation expense account, and finally the life and months. And then based on whatever month or how many items I want to add here, which are just different columns, I'll sort of paraphrase in this budget screen for new capital adds. I'm going to go back to my main tab. This might be one single location department. And then probably time permitting, I'm not going to show you the balance sheet and cash flow screen, but we do have a little template or example for that maybe if it's pertaining or maybe a goal of your implementation, we could have maybe an offline discussion with one of our team members for some of your other goals you might have. All right, how about the last couple of minutes? I'm just going to do maybe a little holistic review. Let's spend just a second looking at security. Another phrase we always say is Prospero is created by accountants for accountants, little or no IT involvement. And in security, let's look at that same manager one user I logged into as. Now, the first thing is we have different roles or groups, because here is one group. And when I mentioned, oh, on the budgeting side, here is our area, what's called input, when I'm doing budget input, that I said, oh, they might have yay or nay to human resource screen. So if I turn that off, that might be a role or group that has no visibility at all to HR. But if they did, maybe I turn on this second button, it's read only, because maybe I'm a control freak, I'm the CFO or a person in HR, that any new hires or fires in the budgeting goes through me centrally, so it might be read only. But there's a couple little highlights of maybe one or two little buttons that are commonly maybe different or could be turned on or off. Now, let me expand that. That was, first of all, maybe 3 key things I want to share with you. The first is the roller group. Second is my user. We even can use what we call Windows authentication that IT loves hearing. You do not have to maintain separate user IDs and passwords. Do not. We can leverage your Windows or network security. But let me show you this generic fictitious user called Manager1. And we have this button here in second term in security is what's called assignments. Because whenever I logged in, they only had access to company 1. But the CFO had access maybe to all companies. So here is maybe the company or companies plural. You could say yay or nay to access, or secondly, location. And even I can click on the insert button and get more granular as need be. Now, let me also give you another example of trees. Now, in this location, it might be a single location. And I have 2 ways again to view my location departments, a good old list view, or here a graphical view. And then how about what I want to do is by region, and then maybe all my Midwest regions have a 4 prefix in my general ledger, or maybe my chart of accounts is not cleanly numbered, so you can have maybe individual department A, F, G here as a second example of our little tree or hierarchies. But how about maybe I'll finish up with maybe this person is in charge of all my Midwest departments. So instead of multiple lines, maybe they have just this one line where I'm giving them access to a summary level of our tree, in this case by location. And last little term inside security, and let me just show you briefly. A nice little concrete example to that is when I logged in as my end user, they only saw 2 reports, but in reality in our demonstration database we have maybe 20 or 50 reports for different industry examples and formats you might want to see or produce, but this user only had visibility to 2 reports. And let me just show you one last little button here. I'm going to be logging in as my power user, meaning the CFO or accountant in the area. And this also applies to maybe budget versions like best case, worst case budget, or Q1 or Q2 forecast. And just to clarify what I did is I just opened up this one report. Let's call it income statement, and I'll compare it to balance sheet. But how about this button here called visibility on this income statement? Maybe I want to allow all users to see this report, but also only based on their company or department or location I gave them access to. Or if it's not everybody, maybe I can say, nope, not everybody sees this report. This might be a balance sheet, so I can get more granular down below by role more efficiently, meaning group, or even I can get down to the individual level based on the granularity of who can see this report. And even I have efficient ways to give people access to multiple reports or all reports, but there's just a little glimpse at the last little user-friendly little area, what we call visibility of who can or cannot see which reports or budget versions. All right, let me just start winding down. I did actually look at the question queue twice during my session. I have another little monitor here. I just reviewed some of the questions, so I think I fielded, as I'm looking back, maybe at least 2 or 3 questions that I see came through the queue. And I'm looking back one more time just to see if any additional ones came through that I can address. And I think I did address all questions, but if I did not, if you have any follow-up questions, I'll still stay on the line a couple extra moments, but a couple of takeaways, either if you're attending live or later through recording. Let me just share with you again my contact information. Again, this is Derek Krebs, Senior Consultant with the MSX Group, in case if you joined later in today's presentation. And some other follow-ups might be, hey, if you want to see a further little one-on-one of Prospero, I or one of our team members can gladly follow up with you on that. Just ping me in an email or info@msxgroup.com, a second way. Another is I see a large group of proportion of our users today might be prospective customers or partners. So along with that demo, we even have a free trial version of Prospero. So that way you can kick the tires and test drive the application with no upfront cost or commitment. That's another huge differentiator that stands us apart from the rest, because I can't tell you how many customers went to a different reporting and budgeting tool a year or 2 later after hundreds of thousands of wasted dollars. They're like, Derek, it didn't meet our needs. Let's now look at Prospero. So take advantage of that. So we're proud of our offering of that. So take advantage of that. All right, looking back one more time, no further questions came in. So maybe we'll just wind down the last couple of minutes here a little bit early. So thank you again for joining, either live or through recording, and call or email anytime. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day and week. and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.